Thank you. Thank you, Suraj. Thank you, Rachel. Along with Rachel, I just wanted to acknowledge somebody who started working in the arts for South Asia, Arun Shivdasani, who set up the IAAC, uh, and in many ways was really such a pioneering force, along with places like the Asia Society and Rachel Cooper. So thank you, Arun, for setting the stage for us. And a big shout out to our colleagues from Spain. Uh, it's a wonderful Our Spain Festival. GLF Valladolid happens every summer in June in this stunning region called the Castile de Leon. It has the best vineyards, and we end the festival in a 12th century monastery at the end of that, and it's absolutely spectacular, and they have the best wine of the region. So a reason for you all to come. So thank you all for attending. You know, the funny thing was somebody the other day asked me, we're assuming you're going to cancel. And I'm like, cancel what? And they said, the other events from India have been canceled in New York, and won't you be canceling? And I was like, why would we do that? This is even more important a time, as Rachel said, to have dialogue, have discussion, have dissent, and create platforms for equitable, respectful conversations. So in that light, I'm absolutely delighted that we are starting with Kabir. As Suraj said, Linda is really one of the greatest experts in Kabir's poetry. And I'm going to start by asking her, Linda, you came out from the United States all the way to India looking for Kabir. What were you thinking?
What a question. Everybody wanted to know, what is she thinking? Well, it was a long time ago. And you know how when you're young, you take one step and you think, well, that's interesting, I'm going to try this. And then it changes the whole rest of your life. So that's what happened. I went to India when I was quite young. I was interested in poetry, and I was interested in mysticism, and I was interested in everything else you can imagine. But anyway, eventually I learned about the North Indian bhakti poets or devotional mystical poets, and jumping ahead several years, I decided I wanted to translate some of those poets. And as soon as I started reading the four most famous poets, I knew that Kabir was the one that belonged in my life. Or people say Linda works on Kabir, but my friend Shabnam says that Kabir works on Linda. And that's what it's been like. Once started, you just don't stop.
Have all of you, everybody's heard of Kabir, the poet, the 14th century philosopher poet? Anybody here hasn't heard?
No, don't ask who hasn't
Okay.
heard of Kabir. Some people may not have heard, but that's okay.
So Linda, do you want to just give us a quick background of Kabir and also tell us, so having decided that this is something that you wanted to learn and experience, you then decided, let me go off into the heart of Madhya Pradesh, which I don't think most of us have ever been to, and find a village in which Prahlad Tapanya, a folk traditional poet, singer of the Kabir tradition, lived, and you landed up there. And now what were you thinking? I mean, seriously.
I mean, you should know that that's what makes life fun and exciting, to jump off into things. That's what you do too. Well, we're now looking at a period of how many years? Anyway, from sometime around 1980, when I finished a dissertation on Kabir, to 20 years later when I walked into that village. But basically, you know, academics and literary people think that literature belongs in a book, right? That's where you get it, literature. But if you're in India and you're studying Kabir or the other great poets of that period, you find out soon enough that Kabir actually lives not as much in the pages of books as in the mouths of singers and the ears of listeners And it's, all the way across the northern half of India. He's very popular. Although you just sent me a video of singers singing Kabir in Kerala at the very southern tip, but mainly North India. So I learned very early that it was singers who have carried the tradition of Kabir from the beginning. So I realized that I should hang out with singers. What a good thing to do, is still call yourself an academic. I wrote a very good grant project, a project description for a grant. It sounded so intellectually sophisticated. And basically it said, I'm going to go hang out with singers. And that's...
Did you take a portable loo with you?
Did I what?
Did you take a portable bathroom with you?
No, I don't have any portable musical instruments, but they did let me play those gungru, the little, they'd let me sing with them, sit with them after a while, even on the stage, but they were careful to keep the microphones away from me, and they let me do the bells. So just about anybody can join in these folk singing traditions. So basically I spent about, I think, 12 or 13 years coming and going, not all that time in India, hanging out with singers, learning from them, having some of the most thrilling and life-enhancing experiences of my life. So then I wrote about the oral and musical traditions and brought that together with the written traditions, which I recommend to everybody to do.
Kabir himself, while he was alive, you talked about literature and poetry and the written tradition. This didn't start with the written tradition. It was much later that Kabir's poetry and dohas were put together. Could you tell us the evolution of that, and at which point of time did that first collection, Bijak, that you've translated, came together?
So whenever somebody says, oh, Linda, Kabir, then the first question I get asked is, what did he actually write? And then I have to say nothing. He didn't write. He was probably not literate. We'll never prove it one way or another, but he was a weaver of the city of Varanasi, modern Varanasi, which he called Kashi, and very humble social class. Probably didn't write, there's no evidence he ever wrote down any of his poetry. He recited it, he spoke it, that's the way things were done. And they were quickly carried like in waves on this oral tradition, which is still alive, even with all of the media and everybody even the singers themselves having all their songs on their cell phones now. But even so, that oral tradition is still very vibrant, and it spread and spread quickly. And eventually, not that long, maybe within 50 to 100 years after his death, certain organized religious groups that were really interested in writing things down in manuscripts, they just made collections of Kabir. The earliest definitely dated ones that we have come from Punjab and Rajasthan, which are far from where he lived. The Sikhs in the Guru Granth Sahib made the first large, important collection of Kabir, that collection 1604. And Rajasthan, just a few years after that, really rich manuscript collections of Kabir. So yeah, I've been working on one of those.
And the Guru Granth Sahib now has a collection of Kabir's poetry. Some were thrown out because they were slightly naughty, but the others stayed.
Well, of course, every kind of religious community that collected these manuscripts, not only of Kabir, but of many other poets, they each would select from the tradition that surrounded them what suited their particular interests and beliefs. So the Sikh collection is a little bit different from the Eastern Kabir Panthi collection, which is different from the Rajasthani Western collection. The language changes, but put together, they all have a certain profile of Kabir, which is why people keep saying they're excited about Kabir. Kabir was such a fantastically fearless, plain-talking, in-your-face kind of a speaker who would remarkably both write of a profound inner meditative experience where he experienced the ultimate that was to be experienced. And he would also look all around at society and criticize the hypocrites and the liars and the violent people and the pretentious religious authorities. And people just love that.
No WhatsApp, no social media, and yet Kabir's poetry traveled across the length and breadth of the country. What was it? And did you want to share a beginning poem with us that you've translated to show us the depth and the beauty and the simplicity of this?
So I didn't know this question was going to come at the beginning, so I haven't selected the poem. Give me my translations. You know.
So normally what we do, Linda and I, because I just love everything about Kabir, and whether it's Purushottam Agarwal or the Kabir Panthis in Varanasi, or Linda's translation of his poetry, and her many books, Bodies of Song, Bijak, her book on Kumar Gandharv that looks at the music. So we normally have a musician who then renders some of the music that we do, and it's beautiful. Sadly, today we weren't able to do that. We had a problem with budgets this year, but we're going to ask Linda to read from that. But do go online and listen to some of the collection. And there's so many wonderful exponents of this tradition, including Shabnam Virmani, some of you will know. You can go online and check her site out. And there's Prahlad Tipanya, who's the traditional singer. There's Kumar Gandharv in the classical tradition. And there's a lot of music of that, as well as many other folk musicians. Linda.
Will you let me do two?
Yes.
Okay. So this one is an example of a style that is associated with Kabir called Ulat Bansi, or upside down language. So you're going to hear some statements that are just absurdities and paradoxes. Don't worry about it. Let it just soak in. But you'll get a feel, and the reason that the poet does such things is because there's an attempt to turn around your conceptual mind and get your experience to a whole different level. So I'm going to do the one that we spoke about, number 8, first, and then I'm going to do a funny satirical poem so that you get a taste of both sides.
So to set this in context, this is from Linda's latest translation, which is going to come out later this year?
Yeah, so this is kind of my culminating project, I guess. I worked for the last 8 years with a co-author on translating for the first time an early 1600s manuscript collection of Kabir from Rajasthan, 371 poems coming out next year, and this is from that. So this is all unpublished. Okay, so both of these have a yogi in them. But this is a true yogi who has a deep and very strange experience. A wandering yogi conjured waves of wisdom. In boundless sound immersed, he broke through thirst. A forest rabbit builds its house in the sea, while a fish lands on a mountain. When the Shudra drinks, the Brahman gets drunk. Fruit pops out where there's no garden. The pit sits in the weaver and weaves. Earth is sunk in the posts. The skein rolls out into warp and weft. Threads cry, we're woven tight. Kabir says, listen, seekers. In the place of unreachable knowledge, by the Guru's grace, elephants stroll back and forth through a needle's eye. Okay. Kabir seems to feel that there are true yogis and phony yogis, and there's true yogic teaching and stupid yogic teaching. So, I actually have to take this out of my phone. So, Here's one where he comments on the latter. What's the point of going naked or wearing a tiger skin if you can't recognize Ram or God inside? If you attain yoga by roaming naked, deer in the forest are liberated. If you get yogic power by shaving your head, won't sheep go straight to heaven? If holding in semen is your game, brother, get castrated to reach the supreme state. Your studies and theories just blow up your ego. You're not on this shore or the other shore. Kabir says, listen, fellow, who gets power without knowing the name? That's the name of God, the divine name. So there's two examples of Kabir. I wish you could stay another hour. I'd love to read you a lot of poems.
Linda, you talked about when a Shudra drinks. A Shudra is, in the Indian context, a person who's seen to be untouchable. A Brahmin gets drunk. Kabir railed against organized religion. He railed against caste. Tell us a little bit about that, and there's one more poem perhaps you can refer to.
Yeah, one of the reasons that Kabir is celebrated, especially by people who have, who've been oppressed by the caste system, and especially those people who are Dalits or who were known as the lowest of the low in the caste system and oppressed badly over many centuries. He's a hero to those people, but he's also a hero to every one of us who wants those oppressive structures to be lifted. So he boldly called out against caste. And here he just says something funny. He says, in this upside-down world, the Shudra drinks and the Brahmin gets drunk. The lines of caste are obliterated. But he openly criticized caste heavily. Yeah, one line is, hey Brahmin, hey Pandit, is there blood in my veins and milk in your veins? Or what was the other famous one? It's a famous one, so naturally I can't remember it when I'm on a stage. But anyway, there's a lot of wonderful anti-caste poetry in Kabir.
And Kabir was born into which religion, and how did he then look at
He's
taking on?
also a hero to anybody who is horrified and who stands against sectarian fighting and violence. And in his day, as in our day, there was violence between Hindus and Muslims, or there was prejudice. And he cut through that and pointed out the hypocrisy of both sides and criticized any kind of sectarian identity and pride. He himself was born in a caste that would be considered a Shudra class, that caste that is the lowest of the four castes, not the lowest of the low, but still very low status. But his own religious identity was ambiguous. His name is Kabir, so that's a Muslim name. That's a name from the Quran. The story is that his parents, his community of weavers might have converted to Islam sometime in recent centuries before his birth, so that their culture was actually quite mixed. It's widely believed that he had a Hindu guru. Scholars argue about whether that's historically correct or not, Ramananda, but there's no doubt that the imagery of his poetry is full of the kind of wisdom traditions from Hinduism. It also has Sufi language and references, but he refused to be named a Hindu or a Muslim or an anything. He just cut right through that.
And he was principally a great street protester, to the extent that it's believed that the town people gathered, came to his mother and said, you come with us and protest about how badly behaved your son is.
Well, these are legends. What's historically verified about Kabir is almost nothing. So there are stories about how somebody oppressed him and tried to get him, trampled by a mad elephant and throw him and drown him in the Ganges, all bound up. We don't know if these are exactly true because they appear in the historical record like 100 or 200 years after his lifetime. But they just indicate that he was annoying to people in authority. But people like to say that he was a protester. I would say not in the way that, say, I am a protester. I am definitely one. I'm out in the streets. He wasn't exactly like that. But he is an inspirer of protesters today. People who are fighting for liberation of all kinds find inspiration in the voice of Kabir. And they use that voice in their liberation movement. So liberation has a very convenient double meaning, right? There's spiritual liberation and there's social and political liberation. Kabir's voice serves both of those, though he wasn't like a modern leftist or something.
So supposing Kabir was here, would he have a poem for Trump?
Well, we just happened to have discussed this at lunch. I thought Sanjoy was going to say, do you think he'd have a poem for the troubles that we see in our world today? But he came right out and said, would he have a poem for Trump? He's very bold. Okay, well, this one was already one that we had discussed, but it seems to...
By the way, I was warned by my colleagues, can you not go down that route? And I'm like, of course not, not. No ice, don't worry.
Okay, well, this is one that we were already discussing, so here's how it goes. I'm great, I'm great, I'm great, says this piece of dust, as if 40 cents worth of chaff equaled 400 kilos of paddy. They call me God's own soldier. I'm the one who kicks the ball through the goal. And then comes a commentary line. Ruined by this kind of pride, many families have danced and leaped all the way to Death City. Kabir says, there's a creator who's running this game. You're a king in the blink of an eye. No kingdom.
Linda, I've read, I think, all of your books and your translations, and I've seen that over the ages, from your very first translation of your first work to this particular translation that you shared with me a couple of days ago, your own evolution in both its understanding as well as the way that you've used language. Your first translations were far more, perhaps, formal, in a sense. Formal. They were very ordered. And these are much lighter. They have a sense of perhaps Kabir's naughtiness or wickedness or a sense of a light being. Do you see that as part of the journey?
Well, I mean, we could have a longer discussion about this, and I could show you some of the very naughty things in my first book. Of course, I've changed. How many years have gone by? But I'll tell a little story about how I learned to be lighter when I was working on that first book. We're talking about late 1970s. I'm working on a PhD project, so I'm a grad student, and I'm in the city of Varanasi, and I'm very serious about this work. But I'm also talking to different people in whose lives Kabir is alive. So I heard that there was this one man on the banks of the Ganges who would meet with a little group of people, and they would just kind of recite Kabir and discuss it. But he was the kind of the teacher figure. He was the one who knew the most. So I said, can I go? And I went, and I sat. And he first of all, he didn't recite the poem. They just kind of half sing it, even if it isn't a song. He just put the rhythm in it. He moved his body. And as he was reciting it, the people in the circle were laughing and he was giggling. And I thought, wait, what's going on here? This is very serious stuff. And suddenly I woke up to the fact that it's funny. Kabir is funny. That happened to be a poem in which he turned all of the characters in a little drama, the human characters, into animals and, a bullock who dances and a fly who fits a wedding sari for somebody. And they were all just laughing at how funny it was because it showed how foolish human beings are. So I learned that every mood is possible with Kabir, including just fun. And yeah, maybe I got more flexible, but I still think I was naughty back at the beginning.
The Kabir Panthis, they themselves have been divided over the ages. You've got the different sects of Kabir Panthis who disagree about everything, including his death, including the way he died, and he in many ways predicted that. So tell us a little bit about that. And is the idea of disagreement part of the process of realization?
So I have to think Kabir is laughing when he sees his followers today. I mean, we could say the same about Jesus when he's not crying.
Or Trump?
Yeah. What? That maybe it's
Ignore.
Yeah. But, Kabir sounded out eloquently against hardened religious identities and organized religions with authority structures. And of course, his followers created sects with authority figures and so on. That's human nature to do. So there's a sectarian tradition called the Kabir Panth, which just means the path or the way of Kabir. And they don't disagree about everything. And of course, over the centuries, they've had their schisms and disagreements. Some of them have very big networks, but they're not always friendly towards each other on certain points. Because there's fights over who really owns Kabir, who really gets to tell the story. This is true of all religions, right? So the Kabir Panthis have argued over whether he was a man or a god. And one branch, the leader of it, tries to say that, no, he was just a very, very great man. I mean, a Mahapurush, greater than an ordinary man, but still a man. Others say that he's an avatar of God Vishnu, and they follow a kind of Vaishnava pattern in their literature. Just the sort of thing he satirized, avatars and so on. Mostly they're arguing, they argue not so much about how he died. They all like this myth of his death, but they argue about how he was born.
Could you just share the myth of his death and the flowers?
Yeah. So this story of his death illustrates how the followers betray their revered guru in an instant. And this is true of us too. I want to say also that Kabir addresses you, me. Hey, listen, all the Indians in the audience that picked up some Kabir in school or in their cultural life, what is the one line of Kabir when it says, Kabir says, Kahi Kabir, then what does he say? Suno, bhai sadhu. I knew you knew it. Suno, he says, listen, you, brothers, in my translations, I had sisters. Listen, he's talking to us. He's making us reflect on ourselves, whereas most of the other poets are mostly talking to God. So he understood that his own listeners and followers wouldn't get it. And sometimes he said, I'm shouting from the top of a tree here and nobody's listening. Oh, well, I'll just keep on shouting. But the story of his death is that he had both Hindu and Muslim followers, very devoted to him, and that the moment he died, there was a fight that soon became violent, and they pulled out their weapons because the Hindus said he must be cremated according to mantras from the Vedas. I mean, with the recitation of mantras from the Vedas in Sanskrit. And the Muslims said, no, he must be buried with verses from the Quran. And they were ready to have a violent fight, right there. Somebody lifts the shroud of Kabir's body, and there's nothing but a pile of flowers. Hindus take half of the flowers and cremate them and say Sanskrit mantras, and the Muslims take flowers and bury them to Quranic verses. And Kabir is off somewhere laughing.
I'm going to open it up to questions, and I'm going to steal a little time at the end and ask Linda to close with a poem. Like I said, I would have loved for us to have some music, but questions from the audience. Anybody? Or I can go back. Go ahead. Up front here in the...
Tell us a little bit about your journey with the language, because, you know, Kabir's dohas are even difficult sometimes for people who speak modern Hindi to understand. And for you, it must have been sort of a double whammy, trying to learn Hindi and then to learn Khadi Boli or whatever the dialect that he wrote in.
Thank you for saying that. It's nice to have a project that's really impossible, that you can keep working on your whole life. Yeah, Kabir's language is difficult, and also it's old. I can only answer that by saying that over the years, I've just kept, trying, and I'm constantly in collaboration with people and having people, you'll see co-authors and collaborators, all the way through my work. And it's still difficult for me to sight read a poem that I haven't seen before. But, gradually I learned more. And I noticed that in the really popular songs, the Hindi speakers really understand it, but not all of it. But they just let the part they don't understand flow by like a river, and they remember the parts that are great. Jini, Jini, Bini, Chadaria. And if then they hear something about, well, I won't try to quote it now because I'll mess it up. But people can just let go of what they don't understand. But my job is to not let it go, and I've worked at it, and I've been very lucky to have such a job to do.
Thank you so much for your translations. As a child growing up in Bihar, I had some of your books that my dad used to give me. Could you speak, given the time of where we are now, you were raised Jewish, you have a Zen practice, you practice a mystic poet. This is the embodiment of bringing together different traditions. That
I'm
Kabir,
not getting everything you're saying. Maybe you
yeah. So you were raised, Buddhist, you have a Zen practice, and then you studied a mystic poet. Could you share the relevance of this time of bringing together different faiths or views of the world? Because I think that is the undying legacy of Kabir.
Yeah, well, you've just opened the door to my life story. How much time do we have here? Of course, the deepest inner experience that you find in the poetry of Kabir is very important to me. And we can't really go very deep into that in a 40-minute gathering like this. I will say that something brought me to India at a very young age. I was brought up Jewish, and I was quite serious about it, but I turned away because there were things in it that really troubled me before anybody was going off to see gurus in India. And later talk to me and I'll tell you what troubled me, but something about India attracted me. And I went to India at a young age, and then eventually the mystical poetry of India, both Hindu and Sufi, and eventually Buddhism, as you've learned. I became a practicing Zen Buddhist and a meditator. Did turn out to be the path for me. And I find much affinity between Kabir and the Buddhist teaching, which of course originated in India. And in this new book, which is coming out next year, I've kind of taken a bold step and tried to demonstrate an actual Buddhist influence on Kabir, which I can tell you about if we ever have a conversation. But basically, Kabir belongs to a tendency in this devotional literature world called nirguna, meaning no form or no quality, in contrast with saguna, meaning a God that has form and stories, like Krishna is the best example of that, with icons and beloved forms. But in Kabir's evocation of a ultimate experience that does not take a conceptual or physical form, is beyond all that, and you have to go beyond that yourself in order to know it. He touches on what is called emptiness in the Buddhist traditions. And if God is nowhere, people say, well, how can you write poetry about a God that can't be described in words? And if God is in no particular thing, then what are you talking about? And so the implication is, some of you are already realizing at this moment, is that actually, so then God is everywhere. Me, you, everywhere. And in your own deepest depths. So that's nirguna, and that's also Buddha nature.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to do the question with her off, but maybe you can end it with a nirgun poem, or did you want to end it with anything of your choice?
Could somebody else ask a question? Because I don't want to go shuffling through the paper again. Go for it. Go for it.
Need to do some hard work.
The next one. Oh, you have one in mind. Oh, I don't want that one. So, okay, I'm just picking one out here. It's not the one he had in mind, but I'm just picking one out. So it speaks at the beginning using a name of the divine, which is Niranjan, and it's like Nirguna. It means without mark, Niranjan. And it uses the word in Hindi, sahaj, which means simple, spontaneous. It's simple, but it's not easy to reach that state of absolute simple awareness. So you'll hear the word effortless, that's sahaj. This is about an experience. Oh, and one other footnote in advance is that one word that Kabir and the Nirguna poets use is they speak of the shabda, the word, a vibration, a sound, that when you're in touch with it, you're in touch with this ultimate living reality. So you'll hear mention of the word at the end. Now I've recognized markless Niranjan, effortless. Reflecting on the Guru's path of wisdom, suddenly I went beyond, drowned, drenched in the great flow. The lotus blooms, the endless sound thunders, the mind finds joy. I see light in everything, like moon in water. This boundless place, this luminous beauty is Kabir's God. A flute, untouched by any hand, plays its sweet melody. A word beyond compare. I listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, Linda Hess on Kabir. Linda will be signing books, so please do ask any question or get your book signed. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to Asia Society. Suraj.
Linda Hess and Sanjoy Roy, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it once again for them.